The name of the project is Digital Transformation of Language Teacher Education. But I'll start with the second part of the project name, data-informed evidence. What do we mean with that? Where do we gain this kind of an evidence? And how do we use this evidence to inform language teacher education? And where is the digital transformation bit in all this formulation? So to talk about the data-informed evidence, of course, I should probably start with what I refer to as, or as the project consortium, what we refer to as evidence. Well, simply, we refer to the evidence as the findings of conversation analytic research, specifically on the domain of language classrooms. Therefore, the title, Using Conversation Analytic Research on Classroom Interaction in and for Language Teacher Education, with a specific focus on the DigiLTE project. What we refer to as evidence comes from a research methodology, multimodal conversation analysis. I'll try to do a brief introduction to multimodal conversation analysis. I think over the years, we have managed to make it known to a wider audience in the Turkish community. So I think you will appreciate that it's difficult to explain what conversation analysis is and how it works in 2-3 slides. But I'll do my best. So the evidence comes from multimodal conversation analytic research. What do we mean with that? How do we use conversation analysis as a research methodology? So let me start with a brief historical account. Harvey Sachs, Emanuel Shegloff, and Gail Jefferson are known as the founders of conversation analysis. And well, their pioneering work kind of over the years turned conversation analysis into the norm for analyzing social interaction with its moment by moment, microanalytic and data-driven perspective. I'll elaborate on all of these tenets, but with moment by moment, I'm simply talking about every moment in a conversation. With microanalytic, I refer to the focus on this every moment in conversation, and with the data-driven perspective, I talk about the use of cameras just like the one over there to collect the data, and start focusing on the data and listen to the data so that it can give us the perspective to focus on a research idea or some findings that will be potentially useful for language teacher education. How do we do that? How do conversation analysts analyze social interactions? First of all, the purpose is to document fine-grained participant perspectives and to do that in situ. How do we do that? We attend to the mechanisms of turn-taking, sequence and preference organization, repair, and environments, to put in a nutshell. Just to further elaborate on these structures, which are also referred to as fundamental structures of conversation. The data-driven perspective of multimodal conversation analysis, and it's the data-driven perspective there also requires reflecting social interactions as it takes place and as it is made sense by the participants themselves. Therefore, how people engage in conversations are also our analytic tools, which can also be referred to as socioanalytic tools. And these are fundamental structures of conversations. People's sense-making mechanisms in conversations are also their ways of co-constructing conversations. Therefore, the fundamental structures that define conversations also become analytic tools for multimodal conversation analysis. Well, just like the foundational conversation analysis, every conversation starts with a turn by a single speaker. But it's never a single turn to call it a conversation. We always have a second turn. I'll just move my hands a little bit up because this is how I always explain how conversation analysis works. So every conversation starts with a turn. As speaker A, I say something. But this thing that I say also has some units in it. They can be grammatical units. They can be other types of units. But the criteria to call it a term constructional unit is commonly known as communicatively meaningfulness. If something in a person says is communicatively meaningful, then we can call it term constructional unit. Combination of multiple term constructional units sometimes, if it's an extended term, just like the one I'm building right now, I have like different units, bringing them all together, designing a term. This is a lecture mode. This wouldn't work like a London everyday conversation or like classroom interaction, but this is pretty much how it works. We build multiple term constructional units. And the discovery that the founders did was actually this recurrence. Every conversation has these term constructional units. And when someone designs a term constructional unit, at the end of they reach the point of the end of the term constructional unit, there is always a place where speaker change might occur, but it does not necessarily. So these places are referred to as transition relevance places. And how we make sense of other people in a conversation is simply these methodic ways. We design a turn, a co-participant listens to our turn, and in real time, they start analyzing what we're saying, and in response to what we're saying, they deliver their own turn. So turn 1 by speaker A, turn 2 by speaker B is co-constructed. What we refer to as next turn procedure is kind of this turn-by-turn mechanism. Because without looking at what is said in a second turn, conversation analysts do not make claims about the first turn. For example, we do not call it a question unless there is an answer to that question in the second turn. And we call that question only when we see the proof in the next turn. Therefore, next turn procedure. Just to move a little bit faster. Well, this is also the sequential structure. So turn 1, turn 2. But a question and answer are also related to one another. According to conversation analysis, every conversation starts with a turn, but it's never a single turn, it's always sequences. So simply when you bring together different sequences, you have a formula to describe the mechanisms involved in a conversation. Turn-taking, sequence organization, and there is also this preference organization. Because when we ask a question, we also signal the preference for what one would expect to hear in a second turn is signaled in the design of a turn. This might be a simplistic definition of preference organization, but this is simply how it works. We design turns, we design sequences, we signal some preference, and out of this kind of reciprocal organization, conversations emerge. There is also the repair. Repair is kind of most commonly known socioanalytic tool in conversation analysis, but it's also one of the most complex things to understand, because we have the correction, but at the end of the day, correction is only one type of repair. There are also other types of repair. But what to understand from the concept of repair to make sense of what will come in the remaining parts of the workshop is that repair is everywhere. Sometimes in the design of a turn, we repair our own turn. Sometimes it is a speaker B repairing speaker A. Sometimes speaker A initiates it and speaker B does the repair. But it can occur at turn level, it can occur at sequential level, but what to keep in mind is that repair is everywhere. And as you can see in my talk, like doing all these things, coming closer to the microphone and going away, there is some embodiment involved in all conversations. And it's not only in everyday conversational settings, but it's also in institutional settings, as we'll discuss. Well, I have this, so I'll give you like 10 seconds to read this, because this helps having a working understanding of all the things I tried to explain so far. Loaded, right? Well, let me walk you through. So simply, conversation analysis frames itself as a robust research methodology because it does one thing and one thing only. What conversation analysis does is simply to describe how people understand each other in social interaction. And well, imagine this methodological robustness. And think about classrooms, for example. Everything in language classrooms is about understanding. And understanding in visible ways. The understanding should be visible to the teacher, right? As the teachers, we should see that our students understood our instructions. And the students need to understand that the teacher got what they told to the teacher, so that they can move on to the next activity. And this understanding in real life happens in visible ways. People monitor each other, people tell things to each other, people organize sequences, design turns, engage and prepare, use embodiment. So this formula gives us a perspective to make sense of conversations in general. Well, it first started as conversation analysis, but it hasn't been static since its foundation. There has been some evolving in the way. Well, first of all, what started based on audio recordings, over time turned into video recordings. Video technologies became more easily accessible, they became more mainstream, and then the development of data capturing technologies gave us the first milestone in the involvement of conversation analysis. And also, diversification of research contexts. Although conversation analysis first emerged, kind of an institutional context, it has mainly been treated as the way of analyzing everyday conversations. But over the years, people started more frequently examining institutional contexts. And the concept of institutional conversation analysis emerged based on this development over the years. And well, what we deal with in this setting is also an institutional setting, right? You can count a lot of things like doctor-patient interactions, or as examples I give here, clerk-customers. And as we experience on a daily basis, teacher-student interactions are also institutional contexts. Therefore, the relevance of institutional CA. Institutional settings in which language teaching, learning, and use emerge. Some examples include L2 classrooms, learner-learner, task-based interactions, teacher development activities, supervision mentoring sessions can be listed as some of the domains that CA can have a say. And there is also the concept of applied CA, and institutional CA is one of the strengths of applied CA. Another strength is intervention CA. And the reason I'm talking about is kind of relevant to the scope of the project. So CA can also be used for increasing recognition of the feasibility that was generated from the data and using this in the setting that you collect the data from to provide some developmental opportunities. CA can be used to improve the operational capacity based on data-informed interventions, like collecting data from a classroom and feeding back to that classroom that you collected data from based on your research findings. This is working like this will work better like this, or simply not necessarily making an intervention, but simply talking about the data itself is quite valuable when it comes to classroom interactions and when it comes to teacher education. Well, the summary of all of this is simply language teacher education, if you think about it, is primarily a setting of professional development, the profession being teaching, and the development implying learning how to do it. And it also explains the reason how CA can make sense for language teacher education and how we use it to collect data-informed evidence. Data comes from classrooms. We analyze the data using conversation analysis, and we identify the evidence, and we use this data-informed evidence for language teacher education purposes is, well, in a nutshell, what we do in the project. Well, just to walk you through some CA research on LT interaction, institutional CA gained momentum, and of course, just like any other things that is kind of turning into a trend, people who are interested in second languages started growing interest in conversation analysis, or sometimes it worked the other way around. Conversation analysts started examining second language interactions, and we started seeing some relationships. And if you think about it, well, there is this concept of negotiation of meaning, right? We always discuss that. It's very important. We have to maintain a focus on meaning. And CA is known for describing meaning-making mechanisms in the way that they occur in actual settings. So the relationship was quite obvious. To describe the methodic ways of meaning-making in LT interaction settings, people started examining second language interactions. And well, we commonly accept that this started with the Furton Wagner paper, the famous Modern Language Journal paper, 1997. I'm not going to elaborate on the details of the Furton Wagner paper. If you haven't read so, you should read it. This is like a very important milestone for SLA research in general, but of course for the relevance of CA for SLA as well. The relationship between institutional CA and LT interaction was kind of made more systematic with the concept of CA SLA, or CA for SLA, conversation analysis for second language acquisition, and the field's L2 classroom discourse over the years increasingly become a mainstream field of investigating classrooms, and the concept of L2 interaction competence also emerged, and the relevance of L2 interaction competence for classrooms, classroom interaction competence also emerged as a term that would inform how classroom interactions work and how teachers and students display some abilities to use classroom interactions for teaching and learning purposes became a concern. Well, with this background in mind, our project, digital transformation of language teacher education with data-informed evidence. So, with the funding from Erasmus Plus higher education funding scheme funded by Türkiye Ulusal Ajansı, we got funding for our project and we started working on it. What did we propose? What have we done so far? So what do we do in this project? Well, expectedly, we film English as a foreign language classes. And this is actually one of the cameras that we use for that very purpose. We collected data from English as a foreign language classes, video recordings of real classrooms. We analyze these recordings to identify specific ways in which the teachers interact with students. We use CA for this very purpose. What do we do with the data that we analyze? we use some examples to create a lesson, a digital online lesson, a MOOC for future teachers of English, but also for language teacher educators, and this is what we'll be discussing in the workshop part. In the remaining part of the project, we follow the first three things, and in the remaining parts of the project, what we'll be doing is we'll follow future teachers who take this online course and who do their practicum. But while doing their practicum, they come together with other pre-service teachers in the partnering countries. I'll talk about the details of this structure in the following slides, but this is the remaining bit. After making this brief introduction, let me come back to this second and third questions here based on the concept of classroom interactional competence. As Steve Walsh defines it, it is referred to as teachers' and learners' ability to use interaction as a tool for mediating and assisting learning. The ultimate goal of the project or all the concept of classroom interaction competence is to increase teachers' awareness of language use in the classroom for eliciting learning outcomes in line with the teacher's pedagogical goals. How do we do that? Well, simply, after analyzing the data, we came up with this list where you will see in the contents of the MOOC. So you will see 7 main units, and in relation to these main units, you will also see 38 subunits. You'll better understand what I mean when we explore the contents of MOOC all together. So who are the partners in the project? TED University is coordinating the project. We have Barton University as another national partner. We have Linköping University from Sweden, University of Potsdam from Germany, and International University of Catalonia, Barcelona from Spain. And TED University, I promised to introduce them in further detail. I hope we have everyone in the room. İlayda is on the desk. İlayda on the desk. Arzu Hocam in the back. Buse is also on the desk. Velat behind the camera. Semih Hocam, and myself. Well, this is the TED University team that has been working on the project. We are a hard-working team because we don't have another opportunities to crazy workload with the project. You'll see when you visit the MOOC. Hopefully, you'll agree with us. Well, this is the TED University team for the project. We also have a research group, so I'll also like to talk about that. TED University Conversation Analysis Research Group. And we have a small team, but the team is growing with new CA researchers in our MA and PhD programs. We have Felat doing CA thesis, we have Melike, we have Tuba, we have Esra is already listed there. So there are like a good potential for future conversation analytic research. Well, in the afternoon session, you'll see a presentation about the poster in the middle, because this is kind of a product of last year's LTER meeting. And just like another CA research groups would do, we organized CA data sessions, and you are very welcome to participate in these sessions. So, let me walk you through the contents of the MOOC very briefly, and then I'll present a case study, but I'll skip some parts because we are kind of running out of time a little bit. I want you to work on the MOOC rather than listening to me, but just to briefly show you what we came up with. So this is what our MOOC looks like. And this is simply based on Moodle. You are seeing all these units, and in the units we have subunits. So classroom interaction management, introducing concepts, knowledge, instruction giving, interaction resources, eliciting students' contributions, responding to students' contributions, dealing with potential trouble. And all of these come from the data that we collected. We actually found the opportunity to go beyond what we originally planned within the scope of the project. Because the original plan was to collect data from tertiary level EFL classes. But we were lucky to have, with our partners' input, to collect data from other age groups. Linköping University collected data from high school EFL classrooms in Sweden. University of Potsdam collected data from EFL classrooms at middle school level in Germany. And Barcelona International University of Catalonia collected data from primary school EFL classrooms. And you will see bits of this data based on video clips in the MOOC while you are exploring it. And well, once you click on it, you see two parts. The first part is kind of a lecture where you see a video clip, you see the transcript of the video clip, and then you listen to the audio description of the clip, which is simply a conversation analytic examination of the video clip. You can also see the textual version of the audio clip, and then once you are done with the lecture bit, we invite the participants to the practice bit, where they can watch a video and they can complete some activities. So I would like to show you an example from the MOOC to give you a better sense of what we have been doing within the scope of the project. And then after I do that, I'll invite you to the workshop part so that you can explore yourself. So simply, we collected the data, we analyzed it, we selected this as the clip within the subunit of embodiments. So you might watch it with embodiment in mind. And we also edit the videos, as you can see. There's some editing, there's some subtitling, thanks to Felat's hard work. We see the logo over there, and all of the videos work like this in our MOOC.
This is a paragraph for the essay question. Given activity seems to environmental outcomes. One of my students in the video wrote this. Looking at it, it was something like the introduction, body 1, body 2, or conclusion. Body 1, how do you know? First of all, okay. This is not from yesterday, because yesterday's topic was different. So study that, and with your partner, talk about changes that you would make. How would you make that healthy?
Okay. Well, this is how we analyze the data. This is not how we analyze, but this is how we present the analysis of the data. When you see a paper, you will probably see a similar structure. But I'll try to keep it a little bit fast. So I'll just only talk about the bits on the right-hand side of the screen. So at the beginning of the clip, just a brief background about what's happening in the classroom. They are simply focusing on students' writings that was submitted in earlier weeks, and they are trying to improve the contents of the text that is shared on the board, and they call this activity a sentence surgery in the video clip. So we see that the teacher first gazes at the board and briefly at the students, and this is working in a way to manage the attention of the students. Wherever the teacher gazes at, the students' attention can kind of be directed to that point. So So the gaze behavior plays an important role in this video clip. And after gazing at the board and briefing at the students, the teacher initiates the whole class activity by reading the question that is visible on the screen. And after that, what we see is, well, yes/no question. Does it look like the introduction? So they are simply talking about which part of the text is shared on the screen. Is it introduction? Is it conclusion? So they are talking about writing, right? So, well, there is also a bit where the teacher says, it could be you. And the teacher does this, it could be you. Because one of the students' text is on the board, and this it could be you is a reference to which of the students can be. And the student says, yes, it's me. While all this instruction given and other things are happening, and there is this sequence where the teacher also confirms that it is hers. And then we see the teacher's question, body 1, body 2, or conclusion. There is also this embodied turn allocation by the teacher after asking the question, by extending writing to the student. And then the teacher manages to elicit some student contributions from 2 students. The teacher repeats the student's contribution and asks a follow-up question. Something which we commonly see in language classrooms, right? You hear what the students say, you repeat it, and then you ask a follow-up question. Because as language teachers, our duty is never to stop, always keep it rolling as much as possible, and this is what the teacher is doing. Well, the teacher repeats the contribution again, this time adds an explicit positive assessment. Very good. And in what follows, the teacher adds, this is not from yesterday, because the teacher told the student, it could be you, but yes, it's me, but it's not the yesterday's writing task, because they are still expecting their grades. It's a writing task that is from before. And there is this transition to instruction giving, and then the gaze posture changes towards students while instruction, and then turns to the board. And after that, the teacher uses a lighthouse gaze, as it's called. So this is called a lighthouse gaze. So simply, to monitor the students' ongoing attention, the teacher changes the gazing behavior, and in doing so also changes the posture. Well, in what follows, we see that the teacher gives instruction for a pair verb and then initiates the activity that is referred to by the teacher as sentence surgery. How would you make that healthy is the question. Because the students will work on the writing task there, they'll propose some changes, they'll try to improve the quality of the task, and in doing so they are also giving feedback to the student that was addressed as it could be you. And well, after giving the instruction, kind of one of the most prominent parts of this clip, the teacher starts walking around. Walks around the classroom, checking students, whether they understood the instruction or initiating the pair work so that they can propose some changes. And then the teacher moves towards the back and in doing so, first takes hands out of the pockets, extends hands, points, and then the teacher does this. First does this and then says, you two be partners. So, embodied instruction giving in a sense. After doing this and you two be partners, the teacher walks to the back, and the teacher's walking back initiates the students at the back to also start the activity. They haven't started until the teacher reached there, but once the teacher walked there, which is another common thing that happens, right? We walk to the different corners of the classroom and then things change wherever we walk. So this is also an example to that. So simply, based on this 1 minute video clip, what we have seen. First of all, we have seen in this clip that embodiment is a classroom interaction resource. Actually, what the teacher is doing with all these changes in the posture and gaze, walking around, using some gestures, and all the other things that's happening regarding embodiment, the teacher is in a way engaging in the embodied orchestration of the classroom, and doing that without even paying much attention to what the teacher is doing, right? But guess who pays attention? Conversation analysts and our project consortium and our researchers, and we bring this to your attention. So first of all, what we have seen working quite systematically in this 1-minute video clip is that the teacher gazes at the board, gazes at the students, gazes at the specific students, to group the students, to encourage activity transition, and also this lighthouse gaze to monitor students, and in case there is a non-understanding or misunderstanding, identify that non-understanding or misunderstanding in the room. And also we see that gesture plays an important role. There is embodied instruction giving, embodied turn allocation, attention managing, and even hands in and out of pockets works kind of systematically. At each activity transition, the teacher removes the hands from the pockets and uses the hands to do something. But when not using the hands, moves them back in the pocket. And the posture, to explicate who the addressee in the room is, to manage the students' attention again, where should they look at, what should they do, and use of space like walking to initiate the activity, to manage the classroom, resolve troubles, if there are troubles like in grouping, pairing mechanisms, and to encourage students' engagement. And the position of the room similarly plays an important role. So overall, what we have seen here is a 1-minute classroom video, and I have just introduced at least 20 different learnables for future teachers and teachables for teacher educators. So what we did in the project, we have 38 such videos that has been described for your own learning or teaching purposes. And we haven't stopped there. We also have added 38 videos that is annotated and complemented with teacher education activities, and we made it open access for the use of pre-service teachers and teacher educators worldwide. In the following parts of the project will be, again, using this MOOC, we'll be bringing together the pre-service teachers from different partnering institutions together so that they can design some lesson plans, and then they can hopefully bring some of the disciplinary knowledge that they generated while they are working on the MOOC together. And then this collaboratively designed lesson plan will be implemented in the settings that they watch the videos from real classroom videos. They were doing real classroom teaching and hopefully show their increased level of awareness towards classroom interaction. And then we'll, of course, video record these practicum teachings, share it with pre-service teachers so that they can also gain their own data-informed evidence, and they can collaboratively talk about the recordings of their own practicum teaching with peers from partnering institutions in Europe. Thank you for listening.